And to start this project off, I'm going to begin by making a preparatory sketch. This is kind of the template of where my boards are going to go, and so this will actually save me some time because I can refer back to this while I'm working and make sure that I have an idea of where this project is going to go in the end. Things will change a little bit because I'm not measuring anything out, but this is basically the blueprint that I'll refer to as I'm working on cutting my boards. Now, I almost always start with a 45-degree angle so that I can use that as my basis to start measuring. Now I'll measure my board just to make sure that we're at exactly 24 inches wide, and then I'm going to come in and measure the outside frame, and I'm going to add about 1/2 of an inch on each side so that you won't see that bottom back panel when you're looking at the artwork from the front. It'll actually look like it's kind of floating off the wall. And then I'm going to come in with my miter saw, and I'm just going to finish off that first side of the frame. And what I always actually do is I'll just finish off one side of the frame, and then I'll use that as a template for my other 3 sides. Because this is a perfect square, then I know that I'll have all these exact same sides and all 4 will match up. Then I'll finish cutting those last outer frames, and then we can move on to our next step. Now that we've got everything cut, we can start to assemble. So what I'm going to do is take my blue painter's tape and start to tape these 45-degree angles together. And it doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to be taking our speed finder and making sure that everything is aligned before we start to shoot any nails in through and make sure that everything looks perfect and square. And now that we've got those sides taped off, I can square everything up and shoot my 2.5-inch nails into each side to make sure that everything is kind of structurally sound. And then I can move on to tacking on our backer board. We're not going to be putting this on permanently, we're just tacking this into place with some staples to make sure that none of my pieces move around as I'm moving these frames. And so as you can see, now that we're all finished, we basically have a huge table tray to put any drinks on, or no, I'm kidding. So basically, to find what my lengths need to be for my boards, I'm actually going to use these spacers, which are just leftover boards from what I had cut off earlier. And so I'm just going to kind of eyeball and find the length of that and use my speed tool to cut a 90-degree angle on that. And then I'm going to move that over to my miter saw. It's a lot of moving back and forth. And so as I'm finding each board, I'll just continue to mark those off and cut as I go using a spacer in between. And so for these vertical slats, I'll just continue that process on until I've completed this section, just adding in my spacers, finding my length, and then putting my boards in until I'm completely finished. And then when I'm done with a section, I'll start to tape off each end because I don't want anything to move around. I'm going to have to move these spacers over when I start working on my other ones because I won't have enough of them. So this will actually keep everything held in place. And now I can move on to a section that's just a little bit more difficult, where we have our 2 45s meet, where it actually makes an arrow kind of a pattern. And so it's basically the same step that I had done before. I'm just going to mark off that one board, use my speed square to mark a 90-degree angle, and then another 90-degree angle. But I'm actually going to cut this on a 45 instead of a 90 so that it fits into both of those different angles. And it actually fits, so basically if it is just a little bit too big, I can shave down any sections that I need to, and then I can just continue that on and repeat that step. Now thankfully, when I get down to these smaller sections and they're just cut on 2 45-degree angles, I can just find my one piece and then use that as a template so I don't need to keep measuring. And now I can just continue on, and so I only have these 2 little pieces left to cut, and so basically it's the same exact thing that we had been doing before, and then I repeat this step hundreds and hundreds of times. So basically the entirety of this artwork is just going to be cutting angles and making sure that everything fits in place following that initial design that I created. And I will say, once you get down to the last piece of a section, it's actually very satisfying because it just finishes off that section that you've been working on for so long. And now that that is completed, I can move on to my larger piece. So this is the exact same process that we had been working on before, but this one's just twice as wide. This will end up being 4 feet wide. So basically it's the same thing except for a lot more cuts. Now I've got a few sections in my design where it's kind of a V shape with some horizontal or vertical slats in it. So basically what I'm going to do is make that V, make sure that it's at a 45-degree angle, and I'm actually going to take 2 of my boards and flip them on their sides so that I can use that as a consistent depth throughout the piece. And what makes these slats so much easier is that I can just find one as a template, and then I can continue to use that over and over again until I have all of my slats completed. This goes a lot faster than having to find each different depth for each different piece. And now with the power of editing, you don't even have to see me cutting all of these because it's a pretty boring process. So essentially I'm just going to be using my spacers and assembling this in the spot where all of these need to go. And so once this is completed, it's actually going to create a lot of visual interest, and it's pretty easy except for the fact that you have to cut all of these individually. Just nice that you don't have to measure them individually. And with all of that being said, this is a very, very repetitive process, and so you just have to keep cutting and going until each of your sections are done. And so to spare you guys and having to see a whole nother section be completed, I'm just gonna speed this up, and so you can see the process of this last one being completed in one swoop. Now that we've got all of our pieces cut, it comes time to have to try to take that backer board off. So unfortunately, this was really a difficult process because it kind of messed everything up. I had to rearrange everything, but thankfully I had pictures on my phone to go in and just start to kind of put everything in place where it needed to be again. And now that we've got all of those pieces on the floor, we can start to use our pre-stain. So basically, this is just a product that makes your stain go on a lot smoother. If we didn't use this, it would look kind of patchy and uneven. And so this is a very necessary step, even though it doesn't look like it's doing anything, to just make everything look very smooth and very professional. And now we can move on to the actual staining process. So thank God I have my sister here to help me because we have hundreds of pieces. And so basically we're going to be staining each of these individually so that it would just make it a lot easier in the end. And so we don't have to go into each and every little crack if this were to be kind of already assembled. And so basically we're going to stain each and every piece before we actually put it onto our board. And now here we are in time-lapse mode just to kind of show the staining process. So we chose to go with this golden oak kind of color because we're working with New Zealand pine and it's very blonde, which I do really enjoy. But when you're putting this much work into all of these cuts and you have all this detail, we really wanted kind of a mid-tone color to show off all of the detail and bring some warmth into the piece. And so basically we didn't want to go with something too dark and hide all of the details that we have, but we wanted something to emphasize what we've put all of our work into. Now we can stain our backer board here. So off camera, I actually shot the 1-inch nails into each of the sides so that the backer board would be on there permanently. I filled all of the nail holes with wood filler, and now we've gone in with our pre-stain and we can use our regular stain to finish off these backer boards. And now that we're completed with all of that, we can start to rearrange our pieces back onto our board. And this is really exciting for me because this is actually the part where things start to take shape and you get to kind of see what it's going to look like in the end. And now that everything is arranged where it's supposed to be, I'm going to glue everything in one by one with my Gorilla Glue and use those spacers to make sure that everything is in the proper place that it's supposed to be so that we can get this secured and final. And now that that first panel is done and drying, I can move on to my other pieces. And so basically, I'm just going to be doing that exact same step with arranging everything on my boards here, spacing them out properly, and then I'll be gluing everything in place so that once we're done with this, everything will be secured and in place. And now what I have to do is put some holes in the back so we have a place to hang this artwork. I'm just measuring so that it's the same width on each side, and then I'm going to go in and drill a pilot hole here so that I can then go in with my larger drill bit, and I'm going to go in at kind of a 45-degree angle so that we can go in with screws on the wall at a 45-degree angle to give some leverage for this artwork. And now I've chosen to go with the Rust-Oleum Chalked Clear because I really wanted these to have a nice matte finish, and I chose to spray it on because we have so many cracks and crevices that this will actually really get into all of those little details and make sure that everything is sealed so that it will be protected in the future. And after about 4 cans of this stuff, we can call this project complete.